Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning, everyone. I am delighted to welcome you to the Deir el-Medina Stories Uncovered webinar, which is being held in parallel to the Deir el-Medina Village of the Pharaohs Artists exhibition. In today's seminar, we will highlight the importance of archaeology, not only as a science that helps us gain deeper insights into our collective past, but also that offers us an opportunity to explore in many ways our gateway to the future. Archaeological discoveries provide invaluable information about ancient societies from which we have no written records, with artifacts acting as proof of those who lived before us and serving as a physical connection to our past. Without archaeology, the history of these societies would have certainly remained a mystery to us. Recognizing its significance, His Highness Sheikh Dr. Sultan Muhammad Al-Qasimi, member of the Supreme Council of the UAE and ruler of Sharjah, has paid great attention to archaeology over the years. The tremendous support of His Highness has helped us achieve a series of archaeological discoveries over the past 30 years, recording the history of human settlements in Sharjah and reflecting the historical significance of this emirate. I take this opportunity today to sincerely thank His Highness Sheikh Dr. Sultan Muhammad Al-Qasimi for his continuous support to the field of archaeology that led to the opening of several museums under the management of Sharjah Museums Authority and to the establishment of the Sharjah Archaeology Authority in 2016. Since then, His Highness has personally followed up the groundbreaking archaeological discoveries in the emirate, the latest of which is the treasure trove of 409 coins dating back to the first Abbasid Caliphate, discovered in a white glazed pottery jar in the central region of Sharjah. The emirate also saw the discovery of 32 iron swords of various shapes dating back to the 3rd and 2nd centuries BC, and an iron key dating back to the Roman period, found on the archaeological site of Mleha. At Sharjah Museums Authority, we take pride in presenting the Emirates' rich archaeological heritage by bringing Sharjah's and the region's earliest stories alive through displays of finds and artifacts at the Sharjah Archaeology Museum, which opened its doors in 1993, to give our visitors a glimpse into the lives of ancient habitats in the region. It is for that purpose that we organize the Deir el-Medina Village of the Pharaohs Artists exhibition, which is a part of a series of year-round events and activities that are precisely designed to fulfill the needs of children and to infuse a love of learning and exploration, and to better connect young audiences to museums. The Children's Interactive Exhibition, on the sidelines of which we are organizing this seminar today, comprises an array of hands-on and knowledge-producing activities, such as restoring replicas of artifacts, becoming archaeologists in a small-scale excavation replica site, and using various touchscreens to write, for example, in hieroglyphic. We are extremely proud of organizing the first of its kind exhibition to allow our young audiences to explore the rich ancient Egyptian history and to learn about archaeology in a fun and engaging manner. I hope that today's webinar enlightens us all and provides us with insightful views about how to use archaeology as a scientific approach that helps us better understand our present and shape our future. On this occasion, I would like to thank the Museo Egizio, Egyptian Museum in Turin, Italy, for the fruitful collaboration and successful exhibition. I hope that you will enjoy the remaining of the seminar today and wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Aisha, for your welcoming words, and good morning to everybody. I would first of all like to thank the Sharjah Museums Authority for allowing us in organizing this exhibition. And as Aisha just said, it's the first of a kind, not only because together we had the chance to highlight a very important aspect of ancient Egyptian history and archaeology, but also because we enhance our cooperation, which respond more or less in the time we are living in. How can we transmit love for materiality in an immaterial way? How we can combine new technology and digital tool with the material culture so that we can reach out to everybody. I would like to say just a few words concerning Deir el-Medina and the importance of this collection connected with our museum. Deir el-Medina is a kind of a peculiar village founded around in 1550 BC at the beginning of the New Kingdom, where 120 families were settled with a specific goal to build the tombs in the Valley of the Kings and in the Valley of the Queens. The Museo Egizio, starting from 1903, had intensive excavations in the village and the necropolis and houses one of the most important collections of material culture coming from that village. The amount of artifact, in the broadest sense, including objects, archaeological structures, as well as archival material that derive or are related to Deir el-Medina is enormous. As such, the publication of primary sources is part of Deir el-Medina studies for generation, and many scholars have focused on that. There is a great deal of analysis of Deir el-Medina evidence going on, and such studies are definitely needed. Yet the conclusion rely on very roughly only 35% of the available body of evidence, even if quantitatively speaking, this might admittedly amount to approximately 80% of it. What is new today is that we are trying to go to a better understanding, a new perspective on Deir el-Medina. We are trying to understand the artifact, the representation and tests, seeing them not in isolation anymore, but trying to connect them with the archaeological context from their producer, the workmen, craftsmen, draftsmen, and scribes, seen as social agents, and from their social, cultural functions, and in-depth research in the archive, as well as on-site field work, provide new interpretive clues regarding these complementary aspects. We indeed seem to be less and less interested in what the inhabitants did per se, that is to say, their decontextualized output. Rather, we are now more and more interested in understanding how and why they did it, which means that the time is ripe for assembling the numerous fragments of the past into a global picture, uniting the what, how, and why. This multidisciplinary approach that operates both on the technical and methodological level, and the technical is something that we are showing together also in the exhibition. How can we reconstruct the context? How can we let these objects and artifacts speak within the framework on the archaeological site they're coming from? But also, there is a new methodological level that tries to put together not only the analysis of the sources, not only the typical philological analysis, but also goes to new fields such as economy, anthropology, sociology, and apply to the technology of production of the Deir el-Medina material. The combination of discipline is partly the corollary of a contextualized approach, which requires different fields to concur with the study of a specific object. But the current trend is likely to be deeper, since scholars in Egyptology seem to be more and more aware that new insights do not result only from new material, but also from new points of view on this material. And this is actually what together we are trying to reach out to education also through this exhibition. The material seen in its archaeological context, seen from different points of view. We are trying to tell together the untold stories to make the material culture speak up, to better understand how really these workmen were working and living. So my deepest thanks once again to the Sharjah Museum Authority, to the wonderful cooperation we had in a museum that in many ways is inspiring to us all for the work that they have done to put the context back into the museum itself. My wish that this exhibition can contribute to education and love of archaeology for a new generation of students that will have to take care of our material past, understanding how in the past our roots for the future. And also my wish that this exhibition and webinar is just a first step of a deeper cooperation between our institutions. So thanks again to the Sharjah Museum Authority. I cannot wait myself to be there and see the exhibition live. I will be in the United Arab Emirates in January, and I will bring my student from the New York University in Abu Dhabi to visit the exhibition. And today from the museum site, you will have lectures from Dr. Alessia Fassone, who is not only an archaeologist, but she is involved in our project of education and inclusions, and she will give an insight of how material culture can be connected with new generations. And then you will have a lecture of Dr. Cedric Gobel, who is curator of the New Kingdom collection here in the museum in Turin, but also has been 4 years the director of the archaeological excavations in Deir el-Medina, and still cooperates in the project led by the IFAO, by Cédric Larcher, together with the cooperation that our museum has with the IFAO. And last, I would like also to tell you that since last Sunday, the Museo Egizio has put online for consultation all our archival photographs attesting the very moment of the excavation at the beginning of last century. For whoever wants can go into the website, go through our photo archive, go back in history, in time and space, and see the very moment where the objects were discovered on site. So thank you so much, and I wish you all a very fruitful day and a learning day, I hope, and I hope that you will all enjoy this exhibition and this new approach using new digital means. Thank you all.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us in the first session of the seminar, Deir el-Medina, Stories Uncovered. My name is Alia Barhima. I'm the Education Manager at Sharjah Museums Authority. I would like to welcome my friends Alicia and Dr. Emily Cole, joining us from Italy and the UAE. Ms. Alicia graduated in Egyptology and specialized in archaeology at the University of Turin. She worked at the Museo Egizio, started from the very start, like many educators, as a guide, and then now working with a lot of segments of society, bringing them together in museums. And we also have Dr. Emily. Dr. Emily is a visiting lecturer at New York University, Abu Dhabi. She received her PhD in Near Eastern Language and Cultures from UCLA in 2015. I'm really happy to welcome you with us today. It's such a pleasure to share with the audience we have today your knowledge and your experiences in working in Egyptology and the teaching field, and also maximize the learning effect to all the segments we welcome in our museums. So without any delay, Ms. Alicia, I would like you to tell us of the projects that you do in the museums, and how do you feel that impacted the visitors in Italy and to the younger generations in particular, that includes schools and university students. Please.
Thank you, Alia, for this introduction, and thank you all for being here today, and of course for this kind invitation. Allow me the opportunity and giving me this opportunity to share with you our experience, because it is something we deal with every single day. And so we want today to give you an insight of what we are working about. Only one moment, because I have only to recover my presentation. I'm sorry, I don't know why I cannot find it in this moment, but I'm sure I will. Sorry, only one moment, please. Or Alia, can you please maybe share my presentation? Oh, okay, thank you, because from the office I have not the same documents I have at home. But first of all, our public, so what we are speaking about, the Museo Egizio is involved in education programs since the 60s. Of course, from the very beginning of its history, the museum takes a very important role in communication and in learning. We want to show you what we do and in prisons, and also as remote learning programs. It is very important, especially in that moment, because of course, with the pandemic restrictions and with the pandemic emergency, we had to shift a little bit from the prisons organization of programs to the online organization of programs. We welcome every year a lot of schools in Italy. In the school programs, Egypt and ancient Egyptian history is part of the curriculum. So all kids at 9 or 10 are asked to learn something about ancient Egypt, and it is something, of course, very fascinating for all the students. We want to give them an experience and insight in the Egyptian civilization, not only with visits in our collection. Thank you so much, Alia. Okay, very good. Next, please. Okay. We want, of course, to welcome schools of every grade in the Italian way of learning. So we have primary schools. The most important quantity of the students are from the primary school, and they can attend to visits, workshops, and experiences in the museum. So it is something you already experience in Sharjah too, because For the scholar public, it is very important to have fun while they are learning. The workshops are very similar to those you offer in Sharjah Museum. So hands-on activities, of course, with replicas or objects they can make by themselves. They have an introductory visit and PowerPoint presentation showing them other topics of Egyptian civilization. And after that, they can have fun learning something more about ancient Egypt. Of course, all the programs are studied by our staff, which has a very long lasting experience in teaching, in cooperation also with teachers, because it is very important to get connected with the scholar programs. The next, please, Alia. Of course, also in the secondary school, we offer different types of visits, thematic visits, and also workshops, because also for teenagers, it's very important to get connected with ancient civilization, not only for people studying classical literature or classical studies or human studies, but for all the schools and all the curricula, also technical curricula, can have something to do with ancient Egypt. So we offer them a variety of programs. Something is more technical. For instance, we show them how we set up our galleries, how we set up our showcases, how to write panels, texts, and how to choose a narrative for the showcases they want to organize. And so they are asked in a virtual way to create virtual galleries of the Museo Egizio, so they can re-elaborate everything they see in the Museo Egizio and to give a proposal from themselves about what they would like to speak about if they were asked to set up a gallery. It is a very interesting activity for them. And of course, they have more artistic activities, literary activities, and everything which is related to the secondary schools curriculum. Next, please, because also for university students, we have a lot of programs. In general, for university students in the University of Turin, we have a strong connection with the class selection lessons and with the hands-on activities, because some of my colleagues, some of the curators of the Museo Egizio, and the director himself are involved in the education activities in the university. So they give classes and they give also students the opportunity to see the objects and also to have activity as a curator, like a curator. We organize also special summer schools with universities from all around the world, from instance from the States, from the UCLA in Los Angeles, from Pisa University in Italy, and from other universities. So we give them the opportunity to have an insight on the life of the museum, not only from the curatorial point of view, but also from the administrative point of view, for instance, from the logistic point of view, technical point of view. So we want to teach students that not only archaeologists are part of the Museo Egizio's life. So they can have a lot of opportunity, although they are studying different types of curriculum. Next, please. We have also special events for involving in the museum's life families with kids. In Italy, we have a lot of initiatives at the national level, like this one, which is named Family in the Museum, which is a national day in which parents and kids are invited in all the museums of Italy, and all the museums offer experiences, workshops, special visits, opportunities to meet curators, to meet educators, and to ask them the most curious questions they have. It is a very nice way to make the museum to become not only a place where people can go to have leisure, to learn something, but they can also have a very active role in the museum's life, because without the audience, without the public, the most important part of our work wouldn't exist. I'm strongly convinced that the museum must be also a welcoming place, but also a meeting place for everyone, also for small kids. And so in the next slide, I want to show you another interesting topic that people can find in the Museo Egizio. So families with very, very small kids from 0 up to 6 years old can have the opportunity to live this special place, which is organized in cooperation with a very important society of educators working in Torino from a very long time. And they offer not only hands-on activities, but also a very calm place where parents and kids can rest, can have fun activities, of course, can learn something about ancient Egypt, but they can also have a moment of rest, which is very important because the Museo Egizio is in general a very popular museum among families, and mostly in the weekends we have a lot of visitors. So you can understand how important it is for families to have a quiet place where kids can have a moment to live also on their own, and parents can visit the museum in the meantime, but they can also have the support of educators, specially prepared for this very special age, and so they can deal with them in a very funny and nice and safe way. In the next slide, I want to show you also the activities for adults. Of course, we don't forget that we have also specialized part of our public, because Egypt is very popular in all the society, mostly in the Italian society, because it's something very fascinating. And we don't forget that even Roman emperors liked very much ancient Egypt. So we have also Egyptianizing remains in all our cities. And because the Roman emperors imported from Egypt objects, so original monuments from ancient Egypt were taken to Rome and to Italy, but also in the Renaissance period and in the last 2 centuries, the Egyptomania was something very important in our history of art, history of culture, literature, theater. So Egypt is something that Italian people like very much. So we have different activities for adults and thematic paths, and also special activities in special moments in the year. For instance, for the Mother's Day or the Father's Day, we have special tours. Let's go to the very last 2 years. So we had to close our museum in a very traumatic way in March the 8th in 2020. And so we had to reinvent our way to approach our visitors and our public. So we tried to find a new communication path, a new communication channel. So in the next slide, we show you how you can reach all our social channels and mostly our YouTube channel, where all the materials here listed can be found in a very easy way and mostly free, for free, and so they are accessible for everyone. Our director, Christian Greco, shot like 30 hours of tours in our museum, divided into episodes. So people can go through the Museo Egizio in a virtual way, following a visit with the director. So we have like pills of 5-10 minutes long, and you can discover different aspects of our collection going through all the galleries of our museum. We had a very great success with the so-called walks with the director in the Museo Egizio and in prisons and in the online modality. Next one, please. After this experience, we decided also to give the opportunity to parents, grandparents, and everyone who was attending kids at home to have hands-on activities. So small tutorials were given by myself and my colleagues to create small Egyptianizing objects like bracelets, amulets, or small vases with everything that families have at home to entertain a little bit the kids. Next one, please. And we decided also to organize ourselves a virtual tour in our galleries, and especially in Deir el-Medina and the Tomb of Kha galleries, which is strongly connected with that you are viewing now in Sharjah Museum. It is very interesting because if you go through the virtual tour, you can discover a lot of information taken from our database, from our videos, so people can access to our YouTube channel through the virtual tour. Virtual tour is translated into English, French, German, and also Arabic. So I invite you to click on the link below and to discover Deir el-Medina galleries in the Museo Egizio in Torino. Next one, please. And we developed also remote learning programs. That was something completely new for our museum and also for other museums in Italy. So we didn't give visits in the classic way with a camera recording people speaking, but we have like virtual programs that would be impossible to carry out physically in our galleries. So we connect different galleries throughout the museum, and we speak about thematic topics like, for instance, funerary beliefs, the tombs, the architecture, so we can show more materials that would be impossible to show in a physical visit in the Museo Egizio. And we have two programs for the moment for primary schools. We have two programs for secondary schools, and we are developing programs for families, always enjoying our activities from remote. Next one, please. And the same is with small workshops that can complete the online activities. So teachers are provided with materials to prepare the class for their online activity. And they have also like a final test and final activities to carry out in the classroom with their students. And it is very interesting because we have a very positive feedbacks, and the students are very proud to send our educational department all the results of their activity with their classmates. Next one, please. And we have also outreach programs to reach everyone who cannot come to the museum, so outside in hospitals, prisons, and in suburbs. But also we try to bring people in the museum from those communities that normally don't come to the museum. Our speaking community is one of our targets, as our collection comes from Egypt, and migrant students. In next slide, I want to show very briefly what we do with a center of education for teenagers here in Torino, coming from all around the world. Most of them are coming from Northern Africa, from Morocco, or from Egypt, some from Syria. So we have a lot of Arabic-speaking students, and we decided to name this project Many Voices in the Museum, because in next slide, we can see how they deal with our collection. They study in the galleries. So they are asked to attend to a workshop of Italian language through art. So at the end of their workshop, they can lead a very small thematic tour and in Italian and in their native language, which is the most important point, because we want they to get connected with their families and their communities. So some of them record their visit, or they have a live connection on Facebook with their families all around the world, or their communities at home, and they are asked to invite 2 or 3 people from their family, their friends, or their communities. In this way, through the students, we can also welcome people who normally couldn't come or would not come to the museum. Next one, I think also is the last one. We have no architectural barriers. So accessibility is one of the points on which we are working very strongly in these months, because we want the Museo Egizio to become a welcoming place for everyone, for every public from all around the world, and with all the physical characteristics. I'm here available for any questions after next session. So thank you, Alia, for this technical support.
Thank you very much, Alicia. This is wonderful what you are doing in the museum. I have a couple of questions in mind, but I'm also welcoming everyone joining us in the attendees list to post your questions in the Q&A, and we will be more than happy to discuss them with you. Now I would like to welcome Dr. Emily, just also to talk about what you are, how you started as well, and your project that you have been doing in terms of Egyptology with students and the university. So please, I would like you all to welcome Dr. Emily with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Alessia. That was wonderful as well. And thank you again to the Sharjah Museum Authority and to you, Alia, for organizing this. It's really a wonderful event. I will admit I have not yet visited the exhibit, but I can't wait to come up and see it. And today I want to share a little bit about the different educational initiatives that I've done in the UAE and in Egypt, as well as in the United States. So I'm going to go ahead and share a short presentation. All right, is that a thumbs up for seeing the screen? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So as Director Greco mentioned at the beginning, the exhibit focuses on Deir el-Medina, this city in Egypt, in the southern part of Egypt that was inhabited by workmen who worked on the royal tombs. And one of the things that I've been interested in throughout my career, thinking about education and thinking about especially educating on the topic of ancient Egypt, is thinking about the diversity of what ancient Egypt looked like and the people there. And that includes then thinking not only about the tombs, but also their workers, thinking not only about the mummies and the pyramids and all of this fantastic and really beautiful art, but also the people who made them. And most of my career, I'll admit, has not then been focused on the sort of pharaonic period of Egypt, so not on this period of the pyramid builders and the tomb makers, but has instead looked at the later periods, which Alessia alluded to, the Greek and Roman periods in Egypt. But I work at a site and have worked at a site since 2007 that actually, when you pull up an archival photo, does not look that different at first glance. It's also a city settlement, in this case dating to around the 4th century BC until probably the 6th century AD. And this is the town that's known today as Komoshim, and in Greek was Kouranis. Now you can see in this photo that the remains at this site were extensive. While they look somewhat ruined, you can see broken walls. You can also get a sense just of the scale of this site, including right in the foreground, a large, what looks sort of like a honeycomb which is actually a massive grain storage building. This site was excavated in the 1920s and 30s by the University of Michigan from the United States, and was remarkable in the extent of its preservation and with what remained. Now, the site itself is in the northern part of Egypt, in the Fayum region. And specifically, if we zoom in there in the northern part of the town, and just to give you a few more images of what this looked like, we're talking about very high levels of preservation, especially of mud brick remains, of wooden architecture, of niches for religious icons, really a very, very wide range of materials. But as I mentioned, this was excavated. These photographs here are from the 1920s and 30s. And I have to say, I was very excited by Director Greco's announcement that the archival photos from Deir el-Medina are online. I think that's fantastic. That's really a great thing, because we can learn so much, not only from the objects themselves, but from this ongoing history that these objects have, how they pass through the hands of archaeologists into the hands of conservators and museum specialists, really that there's this whole range of people who are handling and working with this ancient history. Now, since my work at Kuranis has started in 2007, as part of a new project in cooperation with the University of California in Los Angeles, the Rijksuniversiteit in Groningen in the Netherlands, and the University of Auckland in New Zealand, really a worldwide project in this case, as well as our partners in Egypt. One of the main things that we wanted to do was really to involve Egyptian archaeologists to the greatest extent possible, and to create training programs. So my director at the time, Professor Willeke Vendrich at UCLA, was very keen on creating training programs which could then be replicated in Egypt at other sites. And she worked with a number of different projects. So in 2008 through 2012, the site was part of a field school. So we had up to 20 students participate in the excavations. And really, this was about providing a holistic training in archaeology on site, and really focusing on, again, replicating this model there. So what we did was we had students from abroad as well as students in Egypt, and they were paired up to work together throughout the season in the field. And this allowed the students to communicate with each other. So our Egyptian colleagues provided a lot of the history and the background for the site to our American students as much as we did. And at the end of the season, the students participated in a graduation ceremony, and then went on to work either in other archaeological offices in Egypt or at universities or elsewhere. In the center, unfortunately, you can only see the backs of their heads, but one of our participants there, Rabia, should be Dr. Rabia. So he went and got a PhD and now works at a site in the southern Fayum directing his own excavations. And this, again, this was a really important part of our excavations there, because, again, there had been so much work in the 1920s and 1930s that in many ways excluded Egyptian archaeologists from the interpretation of the site. And this is true not only in the field, but then also in terms of where objects ended up. And I think Alessia said it very well, right, that these objects are from Egypt, and it's really important to involve those communities. And again, I think for my own work in terms of being an educator, a lot of that has to do with telling these stories. So I was lucky enough to curate a small exhibit at the University of California in Berkeley, near San Francisco, called Object Lessons. And the goal of this exhibit was really to give a full object history, to bring those archival materials into the story and bring those into the discussion. And so we had, as you walked into the exhibit, immediately this archival image from the excavations in large format on the back wall, inviting the visitors to come in and to immediately get a sense of this long history of the objects. As part of that, similar to, I think, what is happening at Turin, but on a much smaller scale, we invited students and university groups, both from high schools and universities, to come in. And we did guided tours with myself and other curators in Berkeley. And part of this was really reaching out to local communities. We worked with a lot of groups, not only in San Francisco, but with programs bringing students into the university. And one of the key aspects of that for us as well, being in a slightly different situation on a university campus, was involving students on tours that may not specifically have been about history or museums. So we had students coming in looking at, for instance, university admissions. So thinking about where they were going to study, we brought those students to the museum, or to the, in this case, the library. So this is the rare books library that I worked at, but we brought them in and showed them the kind of research, the kind of work that could be done. And again, I think contextualization was really important here, giving them a sense of what was in the space. These materials come from another part of the Fayum, just briefly to show you here, from the southern part of the Fayum, but again, all within this region in the north of Egypt, and all focused on this later time period. So on the time period when the Greeks and Romans were heavily involved in the administration of Egypt. So we really also had the opportunity here to speak to these intercultural exchanges, to really think about who these people were, and think about the development of that new kind of culture in ancient Egypt. So just a few more images from that show, showing you how we put the photographs from the archival materials up against the objects themselves. In the case of the photo at the top there, that photo of ceramics, the pots in the case are actually in the photo. So one of the activities we did with the kids that came in was to ask them to identify the pots. And there was one that was a little mean because the pot was upside down in the photo, but generally they got it. Generally, they were all very on top of it. And it really got them thinking about this process, right, of not having this disconnect between objects in cases and museums and the archaeology, but really kind of bringing those two worlds together. And I think that from the video, that that excavation that you have, that hands-on activity, I think is another wonderful way of doing that, right? Really thinking about where these objects come from. We also have video clips from the excavation. We were lucky enough to have those from this particular dig that we incorporated. And finally, we did create workbooks. We were also shut down by COVID last March, but the guide is online. We did produce it in English and we had it in Spanish in the gallery, and we're still working to get that online because the Bay Area community is largely English, Spanish bilingual. And then we were also working on an Arabic version when COVID hit. So hopefully, inshallah, that will come soon. But part of this exhibition booklet was really about getting this idea of lessons and learning through objects in place, and thinking about how you conduct research, how you produce a narrative about an object, and getting kids to think about that as well. And our spokesperson here was our crocodile god, who was awarded them, gave them a badge at the end if they completed their lessons here. So I think the main thing, like I said, that's really important to a lot of this work that I do is thinking about periods of Egyptian history that are maybe not necessarily the ones that first come to mind, and thinking about the people, the everyday objects, and really creating that link. And doing so through a holistic history, through a history of objects excavated, put in museums, and then learned about, by a visiting public. I'm also happy to take any questions, and I want to thank everyone again for being here and participating.
Thank you, Dr. Emily and Alicia. There is a question in the chat box in Arabic. He's a teacher and he's inquiring, how do teachers keep updated with similar opportunities provided by museums? For me, also as an educator and working in a museum, I know that we spend a lot of time and effort working on materials and exhibitions, but also the teachers are part. Do you also work with focus groups in planning exhibitions or materials? What's your strategy in keeping all teachers involved and welcoming them to programs provided? Do you have a strategy for that? I think this is a question even me, I'll be interested in.
Yeah. I can speak very briefly, and then Alessia, I'll turn it over to you. But for the exhibit that we ran in Berkeley, we were lucky enough that the university there had also had a teaching program. There were two groups. There was the University of Berkeley History and Social Science Project, which is specifically aimed at running workshops for high school teachers especially, but for any teachers of K through 12 in the United States, kindergarten through grade 12. And so we worked with people there, especially in developing the booklet. And a lot of that had to do with thinking about some very practical things, such as when can teachers have time off work to come and do these workshops, right? Trying not to make extra work for people who already have very busy schedules, finding out what fits best into the curriculum. So we also worked with the California Public School curriculum. And then we also had an office, like I mentioned, to think about university students coming to Berkeley. But in general, that has been sort of our approach, is finding offices at the institutions that can help us create those programs and act somewhat as a bridge between our expertise and theirs.
Yes, from our side, this moment, yes, I took some notes because in the Italian programs of primary school and secondary school, Egypt is part of the curriculum. So briefly or in a more extensive way, somehow they have to study ancient Egyptian history, ancient Egyptian history of art, and so they get connected with our collection. But throughout the years, we decided to change a little bit our approach. So we have traditional programs that work very, very well because they fit, again, as Emily was saying before, with the school programs from one side, but we decided also to experiment a little bit something new, mostly with the online programs. It is exactly because we can connect different objects that are shown in different sections of our museum. So it would be impossible to run through the galleries and to connect the first one with the last one, and after to go back to the first and go back to the last one. So we can connect with technological devices and of course with video clips, graphics, animations, different objects speaking about the same topic. So when we decided to experiment remote learning programs, we asked exactly what you was mentioning before. We asked families and teachers, and we tested our ideas, of course, on focus groups, and we had the different feedbacks. This way we could correct a little bit our strategy, and this way we have very nice programs, and we are going to implement little by little everything which is coming from the visitors' suggestions, because everything can be a way to improve our programs, and from the schools and from the students' families. So we have two different publics in this case, and the teachers with their needs. So they have to complete their program. So of course they need to have an activity, to have a test, to give marks, okay? It's something teachers have to do, but they have also learning goals, so they have to complete that. For families, we have another approach. So their kids go to school and they come back to their home with some results. And in general, we have a very, very positive feedbacks also from the kids' parents. In general, we organize that for the online programs. It's very difficult to do the same for the exhibitions, for temporary exhibition or permanent exhibitions, because of course this is the curatorial idea that we want to show. So we want to develop different narratives, but in the moment the show is opening, we ask our public to give us support in organizing educational activities. So of course, it is something we do whenever we have a new exhibition. So it is pretty the opposite. So we don't co-project at the very beginning, but we co-project the educational activities in a second step, let's say. So we try to keep into account, of course, our visitors' need and their curiosities and our feedback.
Thank you. That's a great answer. So partnership is key. And as you mentioned, keeping a variety of offerings to the visitors. I also noticed, Alicia, in the museum, you have a great space for kids to play. There is tents. So I believe as well, a variety of offerings will work really well for the visitors, and people will come again to visit because there is something for them. I also want to ask you, with the moving from actual to digital, do you feel there is a lower number of attendance? People prefer online, or they are keen to go back and visit the museum? So that's a question for you as well, and Dr. Emily. What do you feel?
According to the experience we had in the last 2 years, people are very interested, of course, in online activities because they can enjoy them from home, from their classroom, or wherever they are. But it is not a way to replace the physical visit. So the physical experience and everything you feel while you visit the Museo Egizio is also something they want to have. So the online experience is also an engine to push people to come to the Museo Egizio. So they expect to view, to experience something, and the online experience is growing up this desire to come to Torino, so physically to come to Italy, to Torino. We have a lot of visitors coming from abroad, mostly from France, because we are very close to Eastern France, but we from all Europe and from all around the world, we have a lot of visitors also from United States, from South America, and of course, we have limits now, we have restrictions, but our visitors are anyway very, very keen to come to the museum. So fortunately, this is something which is, let's say, a combination of two different types of experiences. I think maybe it's the same also for Berkeley exhibition.
Well, so I was going to say I would 100% agree. I think especially, Alessia, with what you first said, which is that the online experiences can't, and also I think shouldn't replace the going to the museums themselves. And speaking just from the other perspective, from the perspective of the teacher, I will say we did use one of the walks with the directors, or I did in my class on Cleopatra, because it's a wonderful way to actually have the students in a museum space with a museum professional, in this case, the director of the museum, and they're very accessible. And so it was actually a really good way to get some of the background to the history. So I appreciate Christian's work on 30 hours of video. That was really fantastic. But one of the things that I've noticed, especially also in that regard, is that the online exhibits, and you spoke about innovation, right? I think that's the key thing, is that online exhibits don't replace physical exhibits, but also they don't have to, right? You can do so many other things with them. And in my class, so I teach at NYU Abu Dhabi, I teach a class on history and language. And I looked in the past 2 semesters for online activities. We were on Zoom all the time. And one of the things I tried to do was a virtual museum visit where I broke up the students by, I gave them rooms that they could move around. And that worked best with online exhibits that were innovative, that had different activities, had different ways, as you said, could jump between physical spaces and allow them to do that. And I thought that that was really, really wonderful. And those were the exhibits, the online exhibits that worked best. But they were never meant to replace, they could never be done physically. They could never be done at a museum. And I think that's really, I think it's wonderful to hear, everything happening at the museum. The other thing that I would say, specifically with regard to Berkeley, which was not specifically something we had planned because of COVID, that we had actually planned it before we knew that the world was going to change so dramatically, was creating take-home, or not take-home, but creating kits of object replicas that could be sent to different schools to supplement, in this case, curricular activities, but later on also supplemented online activities. So you could have something, you could have someone speaking to a classroom and socially distanced. You could then have objects that were made usually on a 3D printer, replicas of those objects, a piece of papyrus, just things that the students could work with, especially for classrooms that don't have access to a lot of extra resources or materials. And we found that those ended up being somewhat of a wonderful thing in this era, but unintentionally so. But that was a useful way to kind of combine physical objects and this online or more sort of digital tools when you couldn't visit a museum. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Alicia, do you have something to add?
Yes, it was very interesting. Speaking about replicas, what they do in Berkeley or in other universities, because we have a special program with the prison, because we have a special class of fine arts in the prison here in Torino. And the prisoners made for us very beautiful replicas of Deir and Medina objects, some chests from the Tomb of Ka and other objects that, of course, we can manipulate. And we were planning, before the COVID, of course, to have also hands-on activities in the galleries with replicas, because, of course, we cannot make people to manipulate original artifacts, original antiquities. But the idea is, anyway, being developed after the COVID. So we try to solve this problem of touching objects with signification or any other resource. But it is a very important point, because also for blind people, we try to make the replicas available for them, or to print with a 3D printer, as Emily was mentioning before, special objects realized and made exactly for this goal, to be available for blind people. So we have projects that are not only outreach, not only education, but they are strongly interconnected, because everything is in a very connected world. So students are not only from school, but also from prisons or other places we cannot even imagine.
And I really love that about the museum. You are thinking a lot about diversity and accessibility and working with different segments, as well as working with people who doesn't speak Italian, just to teach them about, how to learn Italian through objects. And I think what a beautiful way to learn the language through museums and collections. How do you feel the feedback and the response from the families? Do they feel excited to come actually and visit and actually get a guided tour from the students and youth they are learning Italian through? So how do you feel the responses?
The feedback is fantastic because some students' families never visited the museum in Italy and never in their own country they come originally from. So for them it was surprising to be welcomed in, let's say, also a very rigid institution at their eyes, of course, something which is not welcoming for people who are not feeling to be educated for. So I think that for some of them it's pretty scary, the idea, oh, I have to go in a cultural place, I know nothing about it, and I am afraid not to be welcomed in the proper way. But this way is a connection point between the real society we live in and the cultural heritage we host and we have. So this is a very nice point. Students were very proud, but they got also more confidence in themselves, in their skills and in their knowledge. So some of them enrolled also in secondary schools. This is the most important success we got in last 3 years.
Thank you so much. And we have a question asking about the museums and fees. Is there any charges? Is there any discounts? How can they get updated with the programs for both the exhibition and the museums discussed today? So they would like to know more information about the programs and if you know, any fees, or how do they register and how can they attend?
In our website, so on the museum's website, they can get all the information about how to register for the online activities or for having a physical visit in Torino. They have all the fairs, all the fees and whatever. We can provide also online activities in different languages, exactly because we have educators and colleagues speaking English, French, German, Spanish, Arabic too. And so this is a very strong way to get connected with people all around the world. Of course, we have a special discount for students. All level schools are welcomed and they have special fairs that are very popular in order to encourage classes to come to the museum and to enjoy their activities. Kids don't pay, for instance, so this is a very strong and important educational point. So they can come whenever they want. And we have also special agreements with the Torino city and the region of Piemonte organization. So we have a lot of discounts, and the special projects, so the outreach projects, are completely for free because they are organized exactly between the museum and the institution, the partner institution. So they can have it for free.
Thank you, Alicia.
Yes. Thank you, Alia, for your question.
Emily?
In my case, unfortunately, because this was an exhibit, the exhibit itself is closed, but the University of Berkeley, the Bancroft Library and the Hearst Museum of Anthropology in San Francisco are both free to visit as part of the public school system there. And there is now the online website where the activity booklet can be downloaded for free. And on that same website, there are a number of tabs that go through the objects and materials that were on display. And that's all open and accessible to anybody who would like to use it or view it. We tried to create something of an online record of it. And I'm always more than happy to answer any questions or redirect to the folks who are still in Berkeley to answer any questions of interest in that regard.
Thank you so much. We have the 3 last minutes. I would like to ask you if you have any future projects you would like our attendees here and guests to learn more about, and if you would like to announce any of them, any of the projects.
Emily, please. Otherwise, I can mention one because our virtual tour is going to have a new launch. So we are going to launch a kids virtual tour. So the galleries of Deir el-Medina and the Tomb of Ha will be available for families and for kids, with not only the possibility to go through the galleries, to tap on some objects and to get more information, videos, cartoons, of course, we are speaking about kids, but we have also some games. So they have the opportunity to play online with our virtual tour. And the release will be, inshallah, at the beginning of next year. So keep in touch with the communication channels of the Museo Egizio, because we'll launch it in a very, very short time. So it is something I would like to mention, because we will have also multiple languages translations.
That would be amazing. So maybe if you can also share with us, probably even after the seminar ends, and we can share it to all our attendees registering with us today through the Zoom link. Thank you, Alicia. Emily, do you have any project that's coming or you are working on that it would be interesting for our attendees to learn more about?
I would say just to keep an eye on the website from that previous exhibit. At the moment, I'm working on, or I'm teaching and working on excavations in Egypt. But for the moment, I will put it to be announced. But keep an eye. That website is still being built, and new materials will likely be added to it if that's an area of interest to any of the anyone on this panel.
Thank you so much, both Alicia and Dr. Emily, for your contributions today and being here with us to answer the questions. I would like everyone to stay with us. In 5 minutes, we'll start another session about the importance of protecting cultural heritage with Dr. Zaki Aslan, Director of ICROM Sharjah, moderator by my colleague, Nasser Ad-Darmaki, Museum Strategic Planning Department Manager at Sharjah Museums Authority. Thank you very much for your time with us today.
Thank you for your invitation. Che palle, c'ho corso di informatica.
أعزائنا الحضور وضيوفنا الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أهلا ومرحبا بكم في الجلسة الثانية من هذه الندوة الافتراضية بعنوان دير المدينة قصص مكتشفة. قبل البدء أود التنويه إلى أن الترجمة متوفرة باللغة الإنجليزية في أيقونة الترجمة أسفل الشاشة. سنغطي في هذه الجلسة الثانية موضوع آخر مهم جدا، ألا وهو أهمية حماية التراث الثقافي. نستضيف الدكتور زكي أصلان مدير المكتب الإقليمي لمنظمة إيكروم في إمارة الشارقة لعرض بعض المناهج وأفضل الممارسات للمساعدة في الحفاظ على التراث الثقافي للأجيال القادمة. دعونا الآن نرحب بضيفنا العزيز الدكتور زكي أصلان. أهلا وسهلا بك.
أهلا أخ ناصر، أهلا بك.
بداية شكرا جزيلا ونحن سعيدين بمشاركتك وتواجدك معنا اليوم. دكتور زكي، هناك دوافع لحماية التراث الثقافي والحفاظ عليه. دعنا نبدأ أولا بتعريف مبسط حول مصطلح التراث الثقافي أو الاتفاقيات المثبتة لهذا التعريف.
نعم، شكرا جزيلا أخ ناصر، وشكرا على هذه الدعوة الكريمة في سياق المعرض الذي وجدته يعني معرض رائع للتوعية وللتربية للنشء الجديد. التراث الثقافي هو مفهوم ما تورثناه من الأجداد أو ما تورثناه ما ورثته المجتمعات من الأجيال السابقة، من أماكن ومن قطع ومن فنون ومن ممارسات ومن معارف ومن تقاليد، وأيضا ممارسات أيضا لها علاقة أيضا ممكن في الحرف. هذا كله يعني يصب في سياق تعريف التراث الثقافي. حتى ندخل أكثر في التفصيل، هناك في التراث الثقافي جانبين، الجانب المادي والجانب اللامادي، وهناك أيضا التراث الطبيعي. كل هذه التعريف موجودة في اتفاقيات اليونسكو التي انبثقت منذ إنشائها في منتصف القرن المنصرم. فإذا تكلمنا على التراث الملموس، خلينا نقول، أو التراث المادي، نتكلم عن المعالم وعن المباني وعن المواقع وعن ما يسمى بالتراث المنقول أو القطع، وبالذات في المتاحف، وأيضا التراث المغمور بالمياه، وما يسمى في توصيات جديدة لليونسكو ما يسمى بالمشاهد الثقافية. أما في الجانب اللامادي فهناك الممارسات وهناك المعارف التي تتعلق في الطبيعة وفي البيئة المحيطة التي نعيشها، وأيضا في الكون الذي نحيا يعني به. وهناك أيضا كما ذكرت التراث الشفهي، التعابير الثقافية، الفنون الإدائية في جانب التراث اللاملموس، ويشمل ذلك أيضا الممارسات والطقوس والمهرجانات والحرف. وفي مجال التراث الطبيعي والذي ركز عليه في اتفاقية عام 1972، اتفاقية التراث العالمي، كان هناك في السبعينات اهتمام في إدماج أو تزاوج التراث الثقافي بالتراث الطبيعي، وهذا ما نشأ عنه اتفاقية التراث العالمي. اتفاقية التراث غير المادي وضعتها اليونسكو في عام 2003 وبها التعريف التي ذكرتها، وأيضا هناك اتفاقية التراث المغمور بالمياه. ومن أهمية يعني وما يخص القطع، هناك أيضا اتفاقية حماية التراث، بالذات الاتجار غير المشروع بالآثار والقطع الفنية. وأخيرا هناك اتفاقية التنوع الثقافي التي انبثقت في عام 2005، وهي أيضا خلينا نقول هي متابعة لما عرف به التراث اللامادي الذي تملكه المجتمعات. فإذا التراث الثقافي هو ما ورثناه، وهو ما يشكل رمزية للمجتمعات أو للمجموعات الثقافية والتي تركز على الهوية، ولكن هناك أيضا مفهوم الاستمرارية في هذا السياق.
شكرا جزيلا دكتور على التعريف والتفسير المفصل. ذكرت يمكن ملامح جدا مهمة وجزئيات مرتبطة بدور أو في التعريف هذا بجزئيات الحكومات، والهدف المهم هو عملية الاستدامة لهذا التراث. إذن دكتور، نحن نتحدث عن أمر آخر وهو مرتبط بشكل مباشر، هو كيف في الحقيقة بإمكان الدول والحكومات الربط والشراكة والتعاون مع المؤسسات الدولية لتفعيل اتفاقية الحفاظ على التراث الثقافي، الاتفاقية التي أشرت لها في التعريف اتفاقية اليونسكو، والاتفاقيات اللاحقة التي أشرت إليها اتفاقية 1972 واتفاقية 1995، وبعض التعديلات من خلال الاجتماعات أو التوجيهات من خلال منظمة اليونسكو والاجتماعات الأخرى. إذن هل بإمكانك توضيح دور الحكومات، لأن الدور الأساسي والمهم مرتبط بدور الحكومات والتوجهات الحكومية في الحقيقة للحفاظ على هذا التراث؟
نعم، شكرا أخي ناصر. هو في الحقيقة الدول والحكومات هي أعضاء في هذه المنظمات الدولية، فلها هناك علاقة، خلينا نقول ذو اتجاهين. الاتجاه الأول أن هذه الدول من الممكن أن تساهم في وأن تكون فاعلة في ما ينبثق عن هذه المنظمات الدولية من اتفاقيات ومن إرشادات إلى آخره. وفي الاتجاه الآخر هناك هذه الاتفاقيات التي وافقت عليها هذه الدول والحكومات من الممكن أن يتم انعكاسها على السياسات الثقافية والسياسات التي تعمل بها الدولة في مجال الحفاظ على التراث الثقافي، وبالذات في مجال القوانين. فهنا كما ذكرت، الاتفاقيات كانت في تطور عبر السنوات 50 الأخيرة من القرن العشرين، فمفهوم التراث الثقافي تطور، وأصبحت هذه الدول يعني حتى تكون متابعة لهذه التطورات التي هي جزء منها، يجب أن ترى كيف أن تعكس هذه التوجهات الدولية من خلال سياساتها ومن خلال قوانينها الوطنية والمحلية. فإذا هناك أهمية في التفاعل في هذا السياق، لأن فكرة الاتفاقيات هي فكرة تأتي من مفهوم التعاون الدولي، والتعاون الدولي أيضا هناك أمور يعني خارج الحدود الوطنية يجب أن يتم من خلال، مثلا ذكرت أنا اتفاقية منع الاتجار غير المشروع للآثار، كيف يتم التعاون الدولي على سبيل المثال في هذا السياق وهكذا.
شكرا لك على التوضيح دكتور. دكتور، على نفس السياق اللي تفضلت فيه فيما يخص الاتفاقيات والتعريف، هل ممكن إضافة أو ربط العلوم الجديدة مثل التكنولوجيا، تفضلت الاستدامة بمختلف أشكالها وأنواعها، يعني في أمثلة كثيرة دكتور اليوم نشوفها في الساحات الثقافية والمستخدمة في عدة مجالات فنية ومتحفية، في مجال التوثيق والربط واستخدام المعدات والأدوات. هل لك أن توضح لنا بعض هذه الجوانب التي قد تدخل في سياق التعريف أيضاً؟
نعم، شكرا جزيلا. هو الحقيقة سؤالك ذو جانبين. الجانب الأول هو مفهوم الاستدامة، والجانب الآخر هو مفهوم التكنولوجيا أو استخدام التكنولوجيا. في سياق الاستدامة أنا ذكرت مفهوم الاستمرارية والاستدامة في موضوع التراث الثقافي، لأنه لو نرجع للتعريف من يعني تفهم الاستدامة، والتي كان هو مفهوم منذ القرن الماضي واستمر في 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 الأهداف المستدامة للتنمية، يفهم في سياق التراث الثقافي من خلال ماهية أو أهمية الحفاظ على هذا التراث، لأنه يحمل قيم للمجتمعات. فإذا المحافظة على هذه القيم هي جزء من الاستدامة. وفي مفهوم الاستدامة أيضا هناك مفهوم كيف يكون التراث، ويجب ليس فقط كيف يكون، ولكنه كيف يجب أن يساهم التراث، وهو لأنه جزء من ثقافة المجتمعات المحلية التي يعني من شأنها أن تحقق الاستدامة والتنمية المجتمعية بشكل عام، كيف يكون دور التراث محوري وفي قلب التنمية المستدامة. إذن في سياق التنمية المستدامة نتكلم عن مفهوم الحفاظ، مفهوم حيوية المناطق مثلا الحية في التراث الحي، في سياق التراث اللامادي، وأيضا في المدن على سبيل المثال التاريخية إلى آخره. فعلى عجالة يعني هذا في سياق مفهوم الاستدامة، ويفهم مفهوم الاستدامة بطرق مختلفة أيضا في سياق التراث من خلال الحفاظ طويل الأمد، أيضا التوجهات في عملية الحفاظ. في ما يخص التكنولوجيا، التكنولوجيا يعني هي خلينا نقول أدوات التكنولوجيا هي وسائل تساعدنا في تحقيق الأهداف التي نصبو لها في عملية حماية التراث والحفاظ عليه. فإذا يعني التكنولوجيا الآن أصبحت متعددة وأصبحت متطورة، ونحن نعيش في عالم يعني التكنولوجيا فيه أصبحت يعني داخلة في كل بيت للأطفال إلى آخره. كيف نستخدم هذه التكنولوجيا لإفادة عملية الحماية والحفاظ والإبراز والتعريف بالتراث وأهميته أيضا للأجيال القادمة، والنشء يعني في المدارس والاطفال حتى في لانهم اصبحوا هم دائما متواصلين في هذه التكنولوجيا. اذا في عندنا جانب تعليمي وتثقيفي من خلال استخدام التكنولوجيا. يجب ان لا ننبهر بالتكنولوجيا، لكن لا يجب ان نعرف كيف نستخدم هذه التكنولوجيا لنحقق هذه الاهداف. فاذا وضحنا الاهداف تصبح التكنولوجيا هي وسيله نحقق من خلالها هذه الاهداف. كيف نوصل مثلا من خلال التكنولوجيا أن نعرف بهذا التراث وبالقيم التي يحملها في المتاحف على سبيل المثال، باستخدام ما يسمى بالفيرتشوال رياليتي بالإنجليزية، أو يعني من خلال الوصول المباشر عبر الإنترنت لهذه المتاحف. كيف نستخدم مثلا التوثيق في مجال يعني كيف نحمي التراث من خلال عملية توثيق، خليني أقول، لأنه إذا لم نوثق هذا التراث، يعني في عملية الحماية التوثيق هو عملية أساسية. فكيف نحمي هذا التراث من خلال توثيقه باستخدام التكنولوجيا؟ فهناك الدرونز الآن مهمة جدا في مثلا في مدن سادتها الحروب في الأعوام الأخيرة في المنطقة العربية، في مدينة الموصل، حلب، في ليبيا إلى آخره. أصبحت هذه التكنولوجيا توصلنا لهذه الأماكن دون الوصول إليها شخصيا لأسباب أمنية. فإذا إذا فهمنا ما نحن نريده في عمليات أو في عملية حماية التراث، بإمكاننا أن نستخدم هذه التكنولوجيا التي أصبحت في متناول يعني كل شخص وكل إنسان على هذه الأرض.
أحسنت دكتور فيما أشرت له بشكل تفصيلي جدا، وأنا أتفق معك فيما ذكرت في هذه الجزئية دكتور، لأن نربط هذه الجزئية بالجلسة الأولى كما تفضلت السيدة أليسا فاسوني، بحيث أن التكنولوجيا مهمة أيضا في التعريف للوصول لهذه المتاحف وللمواقع الثقافية، إنما لا تغني بشتى الطرق عن الجوانب أو الزيارات يعني الفعلية لهذه المواقع الأثرية والاهتمام فيها بشكل مباشر وتوثيقها من المواقع. فنرى الكثير من التغييرات في المجالات العمل الثقافي كما تفضلت. إذن دعنا ننتقل للسؤال دكتور زكي، ما هو الدور المجتمعي؟ نحن تحدثنا عن دور آخر مهم وهو دور المجتمعات في حماية التراث الثقافي. استذكر دكتور مقولة قديمة أو ذكرت في عدة جوانب، أعتقد في سنة 2018 أثناء منتدى لحماية التراث الثقافي في إمارة الشارقة، ذكر أو أشارت أحد الزميلات أنه لا يمكن حماية تراث لا يقدره أهله. فهل لك أن تحدثنا قليلا عن دور المجتمعات دكتور زكي؟
صحيح، طبعا هو موضوع واسع وكبير ومهم جدا، والآن يتم التركيز عليه بشكل كبير في كل المنهجيات التي توفرها الدراسات والمعاهد والمنظمات الدولية التي تعمل في مجال حماية التراث وإبرازه. الدور المجتمعي، ذكرت أنا مفهوم الاستدامة ومفهوم التنمية المستدامة، والتي أولا يعني هي لما نتكلم عن التنمية المستدامة نتكلم عن تنمية المجتمعات، فأهمية فهم هذا التراث وكيف يكون هو جزء لا يتجزأ في عملية التنمية ويكون له دور. يعني مثلا لما نتكلم على التراث اللامادي بشكل خاص، هناك علاقة مباشرة بالمجتمعات المحلية. وكما ذكرت حتى في التعريف، نحن لما نتكلم عن تعريف التراث الثقافي نتكلم به أنه هو ما يجده المجتمع مهما أو رمزي أو رمزا لهويته ولاستمراريته في سياق يعني حماية هذا التراث بشكل عام. فإذا الدور المجتمعي دور مهم. هناك جوانب مختلفة في الدور المجتمعي. هناك يعني لدينا دور كبير في التعريف بأهمية التراث من خلال التوعية، من خلال تنمية المسؤولية المجتمعية، من خلال العروض التي نقدمها في المتاحف، وحتى موضوع الحوار الثقافي والدبلوماسية الثقافية بين المجتمعات. فحتى لو أننا نتكلم عن تراث ثقافي لمجموعة معينة من المجتمعات، أيضا نتكلم أيضا في علاقة المجتمعات بين بعضها في سياق التبادل والحوار الثقافي. فدور المجتمعات في التنمية دور مهم حتى يفهموا. مثلا على سبيل المثال، إذا نحن بدنا في بعض الأماكن التراثية تتعرض للخطر، كيف من خلال مثلا العوامل الطبيعية، يعني مش عم نحكي عن العوامل البشرية، من فيضانات، من زلازل آخره، هناك دور كبير للمجتمعات المحلية في فهم مثلا كيفية حماية هذا التراث اللي هو جزء من التقاليد التي بنتها المجتمعات في حماية هذا التراث يعني تقليديا. فهناك أمثلة مختلفة، يعني نتعلم من هذا ما يسمى بالمعرفة أو traditional knowledge أو المعارف التقليدية في بناء المستقبل لنحمي تراثنا. فهناك جوانب عدة وكبيرة للدور المجتمعي.
شكرا لك دكتور. بالتأكيد دور المجتمعات لا يقل عن دور الحكومات والمنظمات، وبالتأكيد هذه الدورة أو الحلقة تكتمل عند تفعيل هذه الأدوار بالنسبة للفئات المذكورة. دكتور، ألقت يعني التحديات والمخاطر، أنت ذكرت قليلا عن الفيضانات والمخاطر والتهديدات الآنية الغير مسبوقة التي واجهها التراث الثقافي في العديد من البلدان بظلالها على الوضع القائم. كل يعني هذه الظواهر العالمية اللي كانت يعني في الحقيقة ثقافية واجتماعية واقتصادية نراها يعني في الوقت الحالي كتحديات، وفيما مضى كانت مثل يعني الاستقلال من مرحلة الاستعمار والاستشراق والعولمة، وبعد ذلك التنمية العمرانية، وأيضا تفضلت وذكرت ثورة الاتصال المعرفية والتكنولوجيا وهذه الجوانب، وبعد ذلك التغييرات المناخية كجوانب تؤثر في الحقيقة بشكل مباشر على التراث الثقافي في مختلف دول العالم. وهنا لا أتحدث عن منطقة بحد ذاتها أو دولة أو مواقع تاريخية وأثرية، يعني كما تطرقنا يمكن في بداية أو في الكلمة الافتتاحية للأستاذة عائشة ديماس. أخيرا هنا تحدي أكبر، وهو تحدي يعني في الحقيقة حقيقي متمثل في وجود جائحة كورونا وانعكاساتها على حفظ التراث الثقافي. دكتور، كيف أثرت جائحة 19 في حماية التراث الثقافي؟
حقيقة في مجال المتاحف، ونحن يعني في هذا اللقاء مع الإخوة يعني أغلبهم من الجانب المتاحف، هناك تقارير يعني انبثقت في العام الماضي أن 60% من المتاحف تأثرت في العالم من هذه الجائحة. وكان هناك مسوحات وتواصل من الجهات الدولية لمعرفة كيف أثرت هذه الجائحة على مثلا في سياق الوصول لهذه المتاحف والتعريف بالتراث الثقافي الموجود في هذه المتاحف. إذن أكيد أثرت الجائحة من كل النواحي. أثرت أيضا في التعليم، يعني لما نتكلم عن التربية والتعليم في مجال حماية التراث الثقافي، كان هناك ضرورة لإيجاد وسائل مختلفة في التواصل أيضا، يعني فهذه التحديات أصبحت فرصاً باستخدام التكنولوجيا. نرجع مرة ثانية للتكنولوجيا، كيف نستخدم التكنولوجيا لأن يعني نعبر هذه التحديات ونوصل إلى حلول من خلال مثلا في مجال التعليم، من خلال ما يسمى بالإي-ليرنينج، أو من خلال الوصول للمتاحف من خلال المنصات التفاعلية وعلى الإنترنت، وكأنك يعني وصلت للمتحف. لكن طبعا مثل ما تفضلت هذا لا يغني عن التفاعل المباشر بين الناس، لأنه تبقى يعني هذه الأمور بدون أن يكون هناك تفاعل وفهم مباشر، سواء في المتاحف، أو سواء في التعليم، أو سواء في الأمور الأخرى التي لها علاقة في التراث الثقافي. حتى في الأنشطة والتعابير الثقافية هناك أيضا تأثير كان لما يسمى بحاملي هذه الصناعات الثقافية. يعني مثلا من هم يعني مهتمين بالفنون والحرف تأثروا كثيرا من الجائحة، وهناك جهود مختلفة تم وضعها لمواجهة هذه التحديات من خلال دعم هذه الفئات التي تأثرت بشكل كبير من جائحة كورونا. فهذا يعني على عجالة كيف كان هناك تحديات، وكيف عملت المؤسسات والحكومات والجهات الدولية على تحويلها من تحديات إلى فرص. أصبحت يعني قبل أسبوع كان هناك في مؤتمر عن الصناعات الإبداعية، وكيفية أيضا ما يسمى بالإبداع، الاقتصاد الإبداعي. فهناك الدول أصبحت تفكر كيف حتى من ناحية تشجيع لهؤلاء العاملين في هذا المجال، وهناك نجاحات كثيرة رأيناها أيضا في مثل هذا المؤتمر الدولي. وهناك أمثلة كثيرة، لكن الوقت أعتقد لا يسعفنا للتطرق إليها، لكن هذه على عجالة في الجهات المختلفة في مجال التعليم، المتاحف، والصناعات الإبداعية، وتأثير جائحة كوفيد.
شكرا لك. أنا أحببت الأمثلة التي تطرقت لها، وآلية يعني وكيفية في الحقيقة تحويل هذه التحديات الكبيرة التي واجهتها القطاعات الثقافية متمثلة بالمتاحف والمواقع الأثرية، وكيفية تحويل يعني هذه الجوانب والتحديات الصعبة إلى فرص في الحقيقة نعمل عليها. أحد هذه الفرص اليوم دكتور نلتقي مع العديد من الخبراء من مختلف دول العالم. في هذه الندوة يعني تطرقنا يعني لجوانب كثيرة، وجوانب الزيارات الافتراضية والتحول التكنولوجي وآلية يعني قيادة التحول والتعاون والتكامل، وأيضا التعلم من المرونة التي يعني خلقت في الحقيقة في مثل هذا التحدي. ولا نتوقع يمكن العودة إلى الحياة الطبيعية يعني وأن ذكر في 2023-2024، إنما نحن في مرحلة يعني في الحقيقة جديدة على العالم التعايش معها في الحقيقة. إذن دكتور أنا أشكرك على هذه المعلومات. دعنا ننتقل لموضوع آخر أيضا ملح ومهم دكتور، بعد التطرق لموضوع الحكومات والدور المجتمعي، أيضا لتطوير وتمكين يعني القدرات على استخدام التكنولوجيا في الحفاظ على التراث الثقافي وحمايته من التلف والتدمير. شرت بشكل موسع عن دور التكنولوجيا في التعريف، لكن بالتأكيد هناك استخدامات أخرى بجانب في الحقيقة الدرونز كأحد الأمثلة، واستخدامها في يعني في تحديد المواقع الجغرافية للمواقع الأثرية وحماية الممتلكات الأثرية، وأيضا بإمكاننا يعني إدراج ذلك في عمليات التوثيق أيضا، يعني الرقمي والبيج داتا وأيضا أمثلة أخرى. هل لك أن تحدثنا قليلا عن هذا الدور المهم؟
نعم طبعا التوثيق أصبح، أعتقد أنه أصبح هناك وعي أكبر حقيقة بأهمية التوثيق بسبب المخاطر التي تعرض لها التراث الثقافي في الآونة الأخيرة من جراء يعني حتى الجائحة. أصبحت هناك فجوة مثلا يعني نسمع يعني بعرفش إذا لاحظتوا هذا الشيء في الآونة الأخيرة، هناك اهتمام كثير في موضوع أصلا السرقة وسرقة الآثار في المواقع، وأيضا التداول بين والاتجار بهذه القطع الفريدة في العالم. فهناك أصبح نوع من عدم التحكم في هذا الشيء. فإذا أهمية التوثيق تأتي، وأيضا التدمير الذي ذكرنا قبل قليل في سياق الدول التي تعرضت للدمار لتراثها الثقافي. إذا التوثيق أصبح مهم جدا في هذا السياق، وأعتقد أن صار هناك وعي أكبر لأهمية التوثيق، توثيق التراث سواء الموجود في المتاحف، سواء التراث الموجود في المدن التاريخية، أو حتى في لما نتكلم عن التراث اللامادي الذي هو أساسه في موضوع الاستمرارية. فاليوم نتكلم عن حتى في الأرشفة وفي المكتبات وإلى آخره. إذا هناك تكنولوجيا موجودة لمشاركة هذه المعلومات أو البيانات التي تضعها المؤسسات المختلفة بهدف حماية هذا التراث في النهاية. على سبيل المثال هناك مثلا يعني منصات مختلفة للحفاظ على القطع المتحفية والأثرية في الدول. هناك منظمات مثل الانتربول ومثل الآيكوم الدولي الذين يعملون دائما في هذا السياق لتوفير الوصول لهذه المعلومات التي من شأنه أن يقلل من خطورة السرقة وفقدان هذه القطع بالذات إذا لم تكن موثقة. فالتوثيق أساسي حتى في متابعة هذه السرقات الموجودة على في العالم ككل. فإذا المنصات التي وجدت مؤخرا هي أدوات لأيضا حماية هذا التراث. طبعا ذكرنا أنواع مختلفة من التكنولوجيا، لكن الوقت مش حيسمح لنا ندخل فيها كلها. هدفها كلها المشاركة، الوصول، وأيضا التعاون في الحد من الخطر الذي يواجهه التراث الثقافي في الأعوام الأخيرة.
شكرا لك دكتور على أيضا تفصيل هذه الإجابة فيما يخص السؤال عن استخدامات التكنولوجيا. أيضا دكتور دعنا ننتقل لجزئية أخرى يمكن تم التطرق لبعض أو تم لمس بعض يمكن ملامحها في يمكن الجلسة الحوارية الأولى، ألا وهي يمكن المناهج التعليمية والأطفال والجهات الأكاديمية. إذن دكتور، هل هناك خطوات أو تعاون لتطوير المناهج التعليمية لتعزيز مفهوم التراث الثقافي في المناهج التعليمية والأكاديمية؟ أنتم لكم جهود في الحقيقة كبيرة يعني، وهناك برنامج تخصصي أود منك الحديث عنه، وهو برنامج الماجستير في حماية الممتلكات الثقافية. هل لك أن تحدثنا أيضا بشكل مختصر عن هذه نظرا لضيق الوقت؟
أكيد، هو التعليم بشكل عام والتربية من أهم الأمور التي يعني نعمل عليها في المنظمات، وهي في سياق عملنا الأساسي حقيقة للمنظمة التي أنتمي إليها. لكن الكل يعرف أن لا يوجد هناك أمل في الحفاظ على هذا التراث إذا لم يكن هناك فهم متعمق لأهمية هذا التراث من قبل سواء النشء في المدارس. ولذلك عملنا العديد من الخطوات في هذا السياق للتعاون مع معلمي المدارس، مع الجهات التربوية. وهناك أيضا يعني في هذا السياق يعني بحب أنوه لأهمية المتاحف أيضا ودور الذي تقومون به أنتم على سبيل المثال في هيئة المتاحف في الشارقة في أهمية التربية المتحفية، وهو في صلب عملكم كجزء أساسي من مهمة المتاحف. إذا التربية على مستويات مختلفة، على مستويات المدارس بالذات من خلال المعلمين، من خلال المتاحف، وأيضا من خلال الإعلام. الإعلام له أيضا
أنا
دور.
أعتذر منك دكتور، ونحن مضطرون دكتور
أوكي.
يعني وصلنا لختام هذا. أنا أشكرك جزيل الشكر على يعني في الحقيقة على إجاباتك الشافية والوافية. لدي بعض الاستفسارات، سوف أخذ يمكن استفسار واحد وهو مرتبط وأجبت عليه أنت في الحقيقة. كيف بإمكاننا يعني باختصار شديد دكتور، يعني أحد الزملاء وأحد الحضور يسأل كيف بإمكان تعزيز حماية التراث الثقافي والاعتزاز به لدى الجيل القادم؟
من خلال المبادرات التربوية التي تكلمنا عنها الآن، وأيضا من خلال يعني أستكمل أيضا السؤال السابق فيه من خلال أيضا التعليم الجامعي، لأنه حتى في الجامعات الخريجين من الجامعات أيضا غير واعين يعني لما يتخصصوا في مجالات ليس لها علاقة بالذات في التراث الثقافي، هم بحاجة أيضا لمعرفة أهمية هذا التراث. إذا أهمية التربية والتعليم على جميع المراحل مهمة جدا في هذا السياق.
شكرا لك دكتور على إجابتك الواضحة والسريعة. دكتور، الشارقة قدمت نموذج يحتذى فيه في كيفية حماية القرى وتكوين الشراكات مع وضع المحفزات، وأحد أهم هذه الأدوار وجود مركز آثار يكرم الشارقة، ولا يمكن تجاهل صعوبة هذا الأمر وتعقيداته في الحقيقة في صياغة تشريعات جديدة. الشارقة وضعت قانون جديد، القانون 11 لسنة 2020، وهذا القانون لحماية التراث الثقافي وينظم عمل جميع المؤسسات التي يعني تضع يمكن في الحقيقة ارتباطات وأجزاء من عملها في الحقيقة في هذا القانون الجديد، وهو القانون الذي يربط هيئة شرق المتاحف وهيئة شرق الآثار والمؤسسات في الحقيقة التطويرية والسياحية. ففي الحقيقة هناك جهود وهناك سعي في الوطن العربي ككل، وهناك قانون وضعه سيدي رئيس الدولة يعني في سنة 2017، قانون رقم 4 لحماية الآثار. إذا نحن تحدثنا بشكل جدا مختصر وسريع عن دور الحكومات ودور الأفراد والمجتمعات. أنا في الحقيقة أشكرك جزيل الشكر على دورك وعلى يعني في الحقيقة التحدث بشكل غير تقليدي عن مجال حماية التراث الثقافي، انتقالك للحديث عن موضوع دور التكنولوجيا والدور في الحقيقة والتحديات والفرص المستقبلية التي يجب علينا في الحقيقة انتهازها وتحويلها يعني في القطاع الثقافي. أعزائنا الحضور، يعني في الحقيقة أجبنا عن بعض الأسئلة، ونظرا لضيق الوقت لم نتمكن من الإجابة على بعض الأسئلة الأخرى. لقد وصلنا إلى ختام الجلسة الثانية. أود أن أتقدم بالشكر الجزيل للدكتور زكي أصلان، يعني في الحقيقة أحد خبراء التراث الثقافي البارزين في الوطن العربي، والدكتور زكي له إسهامات وفضل كبير على القطاع المتحفي والثقافي وعلينا نحن في الحقيقة كمختصين في هذا المجال. ولكافة يعني في الحقيقة الشكر للمنظمين والمترجمين وجميع من شارك في إنجاح هذه الندوة. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
شكرا أخ ناصر، شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا لك دكتور.
هلا ميوت تمام. Shall we begin now? Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for Sharjah Museum for arranging this event. Really, the last session and the final session will be with two of our linguists, our good speakers who have experience in working in Deir el-Medina. Really, before I introduce the two speakers, I would like to talk a little bit about Deir el-Medina and our experience together with Dr. Cedric Gobil with Deir el-Medina. Deir el-Medina is one of the main archaeological sites in Luxor. Actually, when I used to work as a Director General of Luxor, we worked together with Dr. Cedric for 4 years in the site. Really, Deir el-Medina, as I said, is in the west bank of Luxor. It has the artisans village, we call it the artisans village. More than 400 families were living in this village. Also, we have the famous tombs of Deir el-Medina. The first tomb was discovered in 1886 by Mascrew. And then the most important discovery was made by Schiaparelli in 1906. He discovered the tomb of Khan. Actually, you know, when we talk about the tombs of Deir el-Medina and the village of Deir el-Medina, we will talk about the secrets of this village. The ostraka, more than 5,000 ostraka were discovered in Deir el-Medina, tells us about the social life of the ancient Egyptians, workers and the artisans who were in charge of cutting and painting the royal tombs in the Valley of the Kings. If we mention some of the tombs in Deir el-Medina, we will talk about Sin Najm, about the tomb of Khan, the tomb of Amun Ubud, and others. But you know, I leave you now with Dr. Cedric Gobil. Dr. Cedric Gobil used to work as a director for the project of Deir el-Medina. He's now currently working in Turin. But really, I have a lot of stories and a lot of memories together when we were working together in Luxor. I leave you with Dr. Cedric, and we will talk after he finished his presentation. Please, Dr. Cedric, welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mansour. It's really my great pleasure to be here with you today, and it was indeed, I will share my screen, if I may. It was really a great, voila, and like this, voila. So you all see my screen, yes? It was really a great pleasure to be working with you, yeah, Doctor, back then. So good afternoon, everyone. So it's also an honor for me to be presenting you a site that I could be presenting for many hours, many days. But of course, today I will only have a little time, 15 minutes, so I will try to keep it short. Also to be for me, of course, the occasion to present you a bit of the work that Museo Egizio in Turin, the Egyptian Museum of Turin, is still carrying on site. So a site like Deir el-Medina has to be presented also regarding its geography, because the geography is really important also to understand what is the site. So the site of Deir el-Medina is located in the area of Luxor, so 800 kilometers south of Cairo. And as Dr. Mansour was mentioning, on the west bank of the modern city of Luxor, which used to be the ancient Thebes. And as you see, it's located not on the bank of the Nile, but closer to the western mountain. And the reason of that, it's actually that since it's a royal foundation, so the idea was to settle a community of workmen that would be dedicated in digging and decorating the royal tombs of the valleys of the kings and queens. And as such, they didn't want to commute. It would have been too far away for them to travel every day from the Nile to their work area. So they decided to install the site and the village nearby the work site. So as you see here on the picture, walking distance, Valley of the Queens, it's 15 minutes, and Valley of the Kings is 45 minutes walking distance. So it was pretty much in that interest that this site has been created. And as such, since it's far away from the Nile, it has been preserved thanks to that, because the annual flooding of the Nile never destroyed the structure, and no modern city have ever been built on the top of it. So this is why it has been preserved in such a pristine state. This is an aerial picture of the whole site of Deir el-Medina. And I want to take that picture then to present you what is there to be found on the site. So first of all, and that's one of the main interests of the site, is you have a workman's village. It's one of the only few that have survived until now. We also might think about the one at Amarna, for instance, but the one at Deir el-Medina is very well preserved, and still nowadays visitors can see it by going around. Then immediately to the west of the village, you have a necropolis. So just to give you a few numbers, there are 500 tombs, of which 53 have been decorated, or at least have survived with their decoration. We're gonna also have the occasion to come back on that later. And at the north of the site, you have two things. So first thing, you have the votive chapels and temples, so the cultic and religious area, all located at the entrance of the site. And finally, the Great Pit. This was an attempt to find water. I mentioned to you that we are far away from the Nile, so people had in mind to find water, but they were unsuccessful, unfortunately. So what the Egyptians did, and we're also going to have the chance to see this in a few minutes, they just used it as a dump site. So they dumped all their rubbish, but among rubbish are the archive of the city, of the village. So we will have the occasion to come on that later. So the work of Turin Museum begins in 1905 with Ernesto Schiaparelli, the then director of the Egyptian Museum of Turin. During 3 seasons, so from 1905 to 1909, he did clean some areas of the site only. So as I mentioned here on this slide, mostly part of the necropolis and the cultic area and a few houses of the village. You see here the archive picture of the work carried by Ernesto Schiaparelli. So you see that most of the site is still covered with sand and debris back then. But as Dr. Mansour was mentioning in the introduction, the main discovery made by Ernesto Schiaparelli happened in February 1906, when he and his hundreds of workmen, but while working in the necropolis, found the unviolated tomb of Ra and Merit, which bear nowadays the number 8. So you see some archive pictures at the moment of the discovery and when the Schiaparelli's workmen were taking out all the objects. And to the right, these objects are now shown on display in the Museum of Turin nowadays. So you see, were an outstanding discovery with gold leaves, wooden coffin, and also the funerary mask of Merit that you see at the lower right. After 1909, what happened is that the French took over. So on the behalf of the IFAO, the French Institute of Archaeology, from 1921 to 1951, for 30 years, Bernard Bruyère excavated extensively the site. So you see to the right, the before and after state of his work. So it is basically thanks to him that the site has the actual aspect as we can see it nowadays. A bit of chronological overview of the history of the site itself. So it was founded, it's basically a site of the New Kingdom. So running from 1550 BC down to 1000 BC, roughly. So for more or less 500 years of occupation. So this site has been founded by Thutmose I. And we know that thanks to the mud bricks of the enclosure of the village, which bear the stamp of the coronation name of the king. But despite that fact, most of the site and the village is known thanks to the Ramesside kings. So this is at this moment that the site really took on, and we see the golden age. So we barely have almost only information about this period of time. So you have here, as for example, Seti I and Ramses II, just to give you a few big names. So this site, you know, the occupation of this site at that moment was really to the maximum. And then, starting from Ramses III, we see that the occupation of the site starts to decline. But not only the site, it's the whole new kingdom that will face a decline, an economic decline, and also the central power. And you see here at the screen a papyrus kept at Turin Museum, mentioning and recounting the first strike ever written, ever recorded in history of mankind. And that happened in year 29 of his reign. So you see, it was really the beginning of the end for that community, unfortunately. Just then to mention that Deir el-Medina, even if it's, as I mentioned, far away from the Nile, it is still enclosed and kept within a network of communication and a network of monuments. It is not completely isolated on the West Bank. So you see, of course, obviously, at the bottom of the screen, the East Bank, we are facing west. So we have the East Bank of Luxor with the Temple of Karnak and Luxor. And then on the West Bank, you also have many temples. So Deir el-Medina was not alone on the West Bank. But even then, it was not alone. The site of Deir el-Medina was located on a very inhospitable environment. So no vegetation, no access to direct water, obviously, and with the heat, etc. So it was very difficult for the people to live there, but they were helped by people on a daily basis to bring them food and water. This is the reconstitution of the site as it must have looked like during the Ramesside period, for instance. So you see the village and the necropolis in the back. One of the main features of this site is that you have a workman's village. So you see on this slide the current state of the workman's village and a reconstitution of a house as it should have been. So 4 rooms, more or less, quite nice decoration, and also with some cellars fitted in the ground to preserve the goods, because obviously there was no fridge, no freezer to keep the goods. So basically what they had to do in order to keep them from rotting and to protect them from the heat was to bury them in the ground. And you see there was also a kitchen with an oven in the back of the house. So quite nice house with a roughly average dimension of 75 square meters each. Found in the village, but also in tombs, are objects showing the daily life of these people. And this is also why this site is so important for us, for Egyptologists, is because this is the site where you have the most information about daily life. So you see these as, for example, chairs, stools, baskets. You have also tools because they were workmen. So you have a wooden mallet. You have also chisels that they used to dig the tombs. Also, you have some foods that were preserved, like here a dried poultry. You have oil lamp in the top right, and also ceramic jars, tons of ceramic jars, of course, that have survived. So it's really all about daily life. This is why we know them so well. But together with the archaeological remains, why we know them so well? It's because, as I was mentioning you, thousands of ostraca, so these small limestone sherds or pottery sherds, were inscribed with notes of the archive of these people. So the delivery of goods, the list of absence and presence of work. So we know them so well. We know them almost on a day-to-day basis. So as you see here, an extract of what we call the Journal of the Tomb, where amount of work of what is happening on a daily work is mentioned. Also at the visit of a vizier that came to visit the area. But together with inscribed documents, since they were skilled draftsmen, they were able to decorate the tombs. They also were making sketches of their drawings. So you see the outstanding quality of work that we found from this community of workmen. So really we have a glimpse of their life and what they were able to achieve. And they were also able to make joke. Some, as you see here at the lower right, you have, usually this is the world topsy-turvy, turned upside down. A mouse is commanding a cat to beat a human. So really, this is traces of satire and humor also made by these people at Deir el-Medina. But together with that, we found many famous papyri from Deir el-Medina. So you have here, as for example, a gold mine map, so almost a treasure map at the top right. And then just to mention at the bottom, the last one, you have a plan of the tomb of Ramses IV. So also then to show that we have the blueprint of the paper, the papyrus that was used by the architect in order to build the tomb of Ramses IV. So we really have a lot of stuff. And speaking of tombs, since these people knew how to build the royal tombs, they were able to make themselves super nice tombs, very nice tombs, almost to the most extraordinary private tombs to be found in Egypt. So what you have an open courtyard leading to a chapel in the shape of a pyramid. And in the courtyard, usually you have the entrance leading to a shaft and then a series of burial chambers. And then at the lower left, you have a reconstitution of what this necropolis should have looked like, must have looked like. And some of these tombs, as Schiaparelli found, were also found by Deir unviolated with all the contents, also giving us a glimpse of their daily life, but also of their funerary beliefs, as you see here on these two pictures. And what about the decoration? Since they knew how to decorate, well, their tombs are absolutely amazingly decorated. So as you see here, polychrome, an explosion of colors, very vivid. They have survived like this. So there are 53 like this. So I could, spend hours to detail you, to show you all these nice decoration, all giving a glimpse to the beliefs of these people with funerary imagery, but also with divine imagery. They knew the magical power displayed in the royal tomb, so they were using the same for themselves. So a lot of gods, goddesses are depicted in their tombs, also with text coming from funerary books, for instance, the Book of the Dead. And nowadays, the Museo Egizio is working together with the French Institute under the umbrella of the French Institute. We are working in a few tombs, and this is a few pictures of our work that we're doing in the TT214, belonging to a guardian named Khawi. So we clean, we re-excavate. We also did a topographic survey, photogrammetric survey. We made extraordinary findings, as you see here, a few shatties. But also we have in mind to do conservation work and restoration work to preserve these monuments for future generations. So that's what we have done, thanks to the help of Bianca Maden, whom you can see at the top right slide. And the work, of course, continues. But the work does not only continue on site, it also continues in our museum, since we have thousands of artifacts. And now, thanks to the use of new technologies, we are able to go a bit further to what has been assessed previously. So as you see here, thanks to modern CT scannings of the mummies of Khaib Merit, which were found in 1906, we have been able to virtually unwrap them and then discover all the jewels and ornaments and amulets that were still kept on the bodies of these two people. And also using multispectral imagery, we are able to define and find exactly what kind of pigments have been used to decorate these artifacts. And thanks to that, we are able to adapt our conservation work. And finally, regarding the in situ monuments, what we can do, we cannot rebuild the monuments, but we can virtually do that. And that's what we've been doing, thanks to the help of the Polytechnical School of Milan. So we made a photogrammetric survey, 3D model of a monument in situ, and we virtually rebuild them, giving them the shape that they must have had in the past. So this was only a few examples, a few samples of the work that we are carrying on site today and in our museum. And with this last slide, I would like to thank you all for your attention, and I'm absolutely open to all the questions you might have. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Dr. Cedric, for this nice talk, really. But before we move to the second speaker, I have just a couple of questions. Let's say 3 questions about this nice presentation, really. You didn't talk about the workers' huts, which in the Valley of the Kings. You know, we have many workers' huts in the Valley of the Kings. My question to you, these artisans or these workmen were staying shifts some days out of their families in the valley, or they were coming and returning back? If they are coming and returning back, why they built such a huge, big numbers of workers' huts in the Valley of the Kings? You know, for the workmen to rest or to take a nap or to change shifting. This is the first question. The second question to you also, is there any similarity between Deir el-Medina and Kahun and the workers community at Giza? This is a very important question, because I know that, you know, the Deir el-Medina dates back to different generations from different kings, you know, and you spoke about the strike of the workmen during the Ramses III and these things. Also, my last question to you about the royal tomb robbery. Was there the workmen of Deir el-Medina was involved with this conspiracy or not? Thanks a lot, and we can listen to your question.
Well, thank you, Dr. Mansour. Very important questions indeed. Since I had only 15 minutes to speak, I cannot cover everything, but thanks to your question, I will be able then to develop a bit further. Regarding the village huts, yes, obviously I mentioned in my presentation that it's 45 minutes walking distance from the site of Deir el-Medina to Valley of the Kings, but obviously for them, it was too long. You know, when we take the tube, when we take the metro to go to work, or the bus or the train, we can spend many hours, but for them, 45 minutes seems to have been a little bit too long. So what they did, they felt, and this is the obvious answer, they build huts. You have, first of all, an intermediate village, what we call the Village du Col, at 10 minutes away from the Valley of the Kings. There's 57 huts right there as a small settlement. And all these huts have only 1 or 2 rooms, very tiny, but we found traces of their names and tools to show that really they were the same people. And regarding the huts built at the very entrance of the tombs, as found recently by Dr. Zahi, what happened is these huts might have been either huts for guardians, but also huts for when they were shifting tours. Because since you work inside the tombs, you don't need to work only during daytime. You can work at night times, because inside it's dark anyway, and they are working with lamp. So maybe in order to speed up the work, you had to work almost 24 hours a day, but with rotation basis, as you mentioned. So in these moments, since you only have to wait 8-10 hours, you don't need to go back. So this is why I would say they have built these huts. And also some huts could have been used to make a specific work, like to finish the work of some objects before being put and placed inside the tombs. I think this is what Dr. Zahi has shown. So this is the reason, the purpose of these huts agglomerated, gathered all around the entrances of the tombs in the Valley of the Kings. I finished my answer for that. Then the second, because of course, who were working then, who were living in the village back then? The women, children, the rest of the family, and all the grandparents, and they were working there. And since they were working, the week in ancient Egypt back then was 10 days, so 8 days of work and 2 days of weekend. So we knew that these workmen would be out of the main village for 8 days, and then they would be back to rest and to spend some quality time with their family for the 2 days of weekend they had. So I would say the area back then should have been very dynamic, with a lot of going back and forth between the work site and the village of Deir el-Medina. So the whole West Bank must have been quite busy. Then the second, yes, absolutely, the link between the workmen's village in Egypt, I mentioned the one at Amarna, but you rightfully mentioned the one at Lahun. And what we see is regarding the architecture of a village when it's a royal foundation, like Amarna, like Laoun, and like Deir el-Medina. In the spatial division, the layout of the rooms and the houses are always very strict and we see it's not made randomly. There's a good organization, a strong power behind that. And clearly, the reason why we have I told you why we have a workman's village at Deir el-Medina, because it was close to the workplace of these people, Valley of the Queens and Kings. Same for Amarna, the workman village was there to help to house the workmen in order to build the tombs. Well, the same thing applies for Laoun. The reason why this workman, and at Giza as well, why you have workmen villages, well, it's only because they live nearby their workplace. So they didn't have to go back to their family, to the village near the Nile. They had to build the pyramids in the case of Laoun and Giza. So this is why they had to have these village. And what we saw from the rubbish in both cases, Giza and Laoun, is that they were being well treated. They were eating meat every day, so they have their diet was very rich in order to give them power and strength to carry their work on the pyramid site. So this we all know thanks to that. So thank you for having brought that to my attention. And finally, the question of the tomb robberies. Of course, we thanks, and one of the papyri is kept at the Church Museum, but we also have other in the world where these court of justice and there were trials that have been made with judges and lawyers. So a suspect have been brought in front of these court of justice, and among them the names, yes, we have workmen at Deir el-Medina, because obviously they were the people who knew where the tombs were and then where the treasures were buried, right? So the gold, the objects, etc. So it was quite easy for them to go at night time with some friends, very under the radar, or even to bribe, to give a little bakshish and then to bribe and to go and then to spoil and to rob the content of the tombs. And these papyri take notes that yes, we have workmen that were found guilty. And what happened is they have been sentenced to death. And at the same moment, in the list of the workmen, we see that their names vanish. So they stop existing. And of course, they have not been buried in their tombs. So some texts mention what was happening with people sentenced to death. They were dismembered, so they were cut, and their bodies were thrown in the Nile to be eaten by the crocodiles. So not a good end, but that's what happened for robbers, right?
Thanks a lot, Dr. Cedric, and thanks for your answers, but also we will open the discussion after the second speaker.
With pleasure.
Thanks a lot. And
Thank you.
We will leave the floor now for Dr. Ikram Gabriel. Of course, this session is called Turin Museum and Archaeological Experience. So Dr. Ikram did her PhD in UCL, University College of London, and she worked in Deir el-Medina with Dr. Cedric. She will tell us today some of her field work and also some of her research about Deir el-Medina, and I hope that you will enjoy her presentation. Please, Dr. Ikram.
Shukran, Dr. Mansour. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm really happy and glad to be here today and participate in this session with my friend and colleague, Cedric Goubel. And I'm quite happy that I'm gonna share a little bit of my fieldwork experience and research with our colleague in Sharjah. I'll try to share with you now my presentation. So as Dr. Mansour said, I'm gonna present a little bit about my fieldwork experience in the site of Deir el-Medina and also the research I did related to my PhD. So here, as you can see, just in the first slide, I'm presenting a bit of the work I did with Dr. Cédric Goubel in the site of Deir el-Medina. I participated in the excavation work in the site of Deir el-Medina in 2016 and 2017. And during that time, I was responsible for documenting the small finds we discovered during the excavation. So I was taking photographs for them before the conservation and after the conservation. So as you can see here in the image on the right, and that's the result of our photography here on the left. And also during my work in Deir el-Medina, here on the image on the left, we were discovering or doing excavation in front of the Ptolemaic temple in the site, and we were doing some GIS mapping with the total station. And here on the image on the left, I was doing some stratigraphy drawing for the different layers in the site. As you know, it's built, as Dr. Cédric said, during the New Kingdom, but we also had remains from the Ptolemaic. So we were trying to draw and examine the layers of the site. And here, that's a little bit part of the research I did for my PhD. So I was during my PhD, I was studying the cult of a god called Betah. And here, as you can see in the image on the left, that's how the god Betah looked like, and that's how the ancient Egyptian write his name. And that was one of the scenes for him in one of the tombs in Deir el-Medina. But here in the image on the left, I was documenting also the cult of the god Betah in one of the private chapels beside the site of Deir el-Medina. It's called the Oratory of Betah and Mert-Seger, and I was gonna present and talk a little bit in the next part of my presentation about the research I did in that particular place. So we're gonna talk and cover today the oratory of Betah and Mert-Seger in order to know who were the deities worshipped in the oratory. Was it in fact a cult place built for Betah and Mert-Seger or other deities? And we're gonna know who were the people from Deir el-Medina who left object and dedicated offering in the site, and the exact date when the site was built and remained in use, and also the ancient name of the site. That is the map for the site. The oratory of Betah and Mert-Seger consists of 7 rock-cut chapels, as you can see, lettered A, B, C, D, and E, F, and G. It's seven rock-cut chapels. And the exact location of the oratory, it is located between Deir el-Medina and on the way to the Valley of the Queens. And that's how the site looked in the beginning of the 20th century. And that's how it looked nowadays, after the Ministry of Antiquities installed some wooden shades in front of the chapels to protect the remained scenes and its colors. We know that the site was visited by Rossellini and Champollion during the French-Italian expedition to Egypt in 1928-1929, and also visited by the German scholars Lipsius during his excavation in 1900. 40s, and it was first discovered by Schiaparelli, who was the first man to do a real excavation in the site. And then it was, as Cedric of course told you, Schiaparelli was the director of the Turin Museum at that time. And then the site was re-excavated by the French scholar Deir. Unfortunately, Schiaparelli's work was not published, but Deir published a description for the site with all the objects discovered by him and by the Italian mission in his famous monograph called Merziger at el-Medina. That's just a few examples of the remained rock-cut stela in the site. As you can see, it's a stela for the vizier standing in adoration before goddess Merziger. And as you can see here in the lower register, the foreman and some workers from Deir el-Medina are standing in adoration. And that's another example for another rock-cut stela showing King Seti II, and that stela was later usurped by King Setnacht. As you can see, the king is shown standing in front of god Imen-Ra, Betah, and followed by goddess Mut and goddess Hathor. As I said, Deir was the one published the object found in the site by the Italian and by himself, but there was some problems in the list which Deir provided for the Italian finds. As you can see here, you will find a description for a stela, but without an inventory number. And here you can see the same inventory number repeated for two different objects. That's why I decided to travel to Turin to carry a little bit of work and research in the State Archive in Turin and also in the Egyptian Museum in Turin to see the object found in the site. And as you can see here, I found in the archive a small folder entitled Sanctuary de Merziger, which is Sanctuary of Merziger, included the inventory number of all the objects found in the oratory by Schiaparelli. And unfortunately, he didn't mention a lot of details or description for the find. He only gave description to 3 objects in the first page and 1 object in the second page. But the number of objects he discovered in the site ranged between the inventory number S5987 and S6067, which is about 80 fragments of object I was able to trace in the Egyptian Museum in Turin, apart from these 6 numbers, which probably lost their original number in the museum and assigned the new numbers. So these are some examples of the fragment discovered by Schiaparelli in the site, which are all kept and housed now in the Egyptian Museum in Turin. After my research in the archive, I was able to find the lost or the missed number for the stela, and also to correct the exact date where the Italian were there. But also I found several problems in the list given by Deir, which is he included some numbers which does not belong to the inventory of finds by Schiaparelli in the site. So we have 80 number between these intervals, and these are all numbers included by Deir in his list, in his published list of find for the Italian, which do not belong to or discovered in the oratory. I'm gonna explore just 2 stela in his numbers, which is these 2 stelae. It's 2 stelae which Deir said that they were found by Schiaparelli in exactly Chapel D. And the first one is just a draft stela showing a king. It's in a very bad condition, sorry. It's a draft stela for a king before deities. And as you can see here, again, we have a king receiving the jubilee sticks and symbols from Emin Ra here and Mut and Khonsu. Actually, again, going back to the archive of Schiaparelli, I found these two objects, the number of these two stela, among another intervals of find by Schiaparelli called Deir el-Medina. So these two objects were found by Schiaparelli in Deir el-Medina, in fact, but not in the oratory. And owing to the work done by the other colleague in the Turin Museum, they were able to identify other places where Schiaparelli was active and excavated in the site. So one of the sites Schiaparelli used to work was here outside the enclosure of the Ptolemaic temple, where actually in fact located another chapel which is called Chapel D. So it's most probably these two stela referred by Deir as found in Chapel D, found here in the site of Deir Medina in that Chapel D, not in the oratory for Petah and Merit Seger. And these are the other part of the find discovered in the site by Deir, where he presented just a line drawing, as you can see in his publication. But there is an important object discovered by Deir during his excavation, which is a fragment of stela dedicated by the artist Ben Yud, which actually mentioned the original name of the site. As he said, I made a stela in the houses of the gods beside the place of beauty, which is the Valley of the Queens. And then that's his title, servant in the place of Ma'at, and his name. So owing to that object, we know that the workers of Deir Medina called the site the sanctuary beside the Valley of the Queens, and they didn't name it after the god Petah or goddess Merit Seger. And also through the object found in the site, I was able to identify some important names who dedicated object in the site. As you can see in this table, some of the viziers and some of the foremen, and I was able to date them when they were actually working in the site of Deir Medina and dedicated this offering in the site, and also some other scribes and artists. And not all of them was I was able to trace back, because some names like Hoi and Bashed, as you can see here in the table, were very common among the workers of Deir Medina. So it was unable for me to date them, but as well, despite all of that, this object provided very important evidence for the chronology of the site. Deir dated the site to the reign of King Setnacht and Ramses III from the 20th dynasty, but through examining the object found in the site by the Italian and the French mission, the date of the site seems to go back to the reign of King Horemheb at the end of the 18th dynasty, or the reign of King Seti I from the beginning of the 20th dynasty. So it was used like from the very beginning during the settlement of Deir Medina, and the site remained in use until the reign of King Ramses VI. Last thing, to go back to the original question, who were the gods worshipped in the oratory? So as you see here in that graph, I collected all the fragment of object dedicated to the deities, and also the scenes for each deity in numbers. And as you can see here in the graph, we can see names of so many deities worshipped in the site: Emin Ra, Anubis, Hathor, Isis, Osiris, so many ancient Egyptian deities. And as it is clear in the graph that god Petah received the highest number of scenes and objects in the site. But also, as you see here, that is Goddess Merit Seeger. She was not actually a prominent figure in the site, as it is thought by many Egyptologists, as she didn't receive a lot of objects in the site or had many scenes. And in fact, other deity like Imen-Ra and Hathor surpass Merit Seeger in the number of scenes and objects. So it's not only through the ancient name of the site, but also through the archaeology of the object and the scenes remained in the site. We know that the site was a cult place for so many deities, not only Betah and Merit Seeger, and was in use from the late 18th dynasty or from the beginning of the 19th dynasty. And at the end of my presentation, I would like to thank these people a lot who made my research during like at the site in Deir Medina and in the archive and in Turin possible for me to gather this information. And I would like to thank you all for attending our session today. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Ikram. Really, it was a nice presentation. But before we go to the audience and to any open the discussions, it's just a big question for small question for both of you. You know, since 2005, we received a proposal that they want to do a reconstruction for the house of Sennejim in Deir el-Medina for the visitations, for the visitor to see how. Because we know the house of Sennejim, it is in the beginning of the city, as you know, and I think the Fresh Institute, they received a proposal, or they submit a proposal to rebuild this house. Are you, both of you, with this idea or no? Because you know the people, thanks to Corona, you know the visitors to Deir el-Medina were a lot. Finally, the tombs took a rest for 1.5 years. Because of Corona, and we closed the tombs. But return it back to my question. Do you agree with this idea to rebuild the house of Sennejim as an example of the artisans' village in Deir el-Medina or no? At Deir el-Medina or no? Thanks.
Well, if I may, what you mentioned, Dr. Mansour, is it to rebuild the house inside the village properly, or to make like facto Marte, to make another one, a facsimile outside the village, but in the site, but outside the village?
But outside the village, you know, the shelter in the
okay,
of the visitation. Well, they want to rebuild, you know, as an example, the house of Sennejim, and they want to put some of the equipments which they were using during this the time of the village, to be, you know, to be an example, a facsimile of the, or a reconstruction of one of the houses, to show to the visitors how the life was looked like. Because as you mentioned in your presentations, that the village is very isolated, very independent, no vegetation. The houses are next to each other, very crowded. 400 families were living in the city. So they want to show the visitors how the houses were looking like in the ancient times. Do you agree with this idea?
I would agree. If it's a reconstitution outside and you make it nice, and I would say why not? Because again, the important in our work is the dissemination of the information. So if by this we get more people, we get you know, our information to be disseminated more, well, that would be a good idea in this matter.
Dr. Ikram.
Just as far as I remember, there was and still is, I guess, a moquette, like a model for one of the houses from Deir Medina already in the visitor center, but I don't know the construction for which house exactly from Deir Medina. But as Cedric said, I guess it will be, as long as it's not an actual reconstruction in the house for the visitors to go, which I guess the site is quite fragile. fragile to allow that, contrary to visiting the tombs. So just having a small model for the people to have a little example about the division of the houses. And I remember like seeing the visitors enjoying seeing that model, and everyone was wondering where is their toilets in the houses, because you cannot see an exact specific room for it. So it's really interesting for the visitors to see how the ancient Egyptian lived their life and divided their houses.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
We will now open the discussions. I think you know the organizers can open the discussion, the questions.
Yes.
You know how can we arrange it? Thanks again, Dr. Cedric and Dr. Ikram. Really, it was a nice presentation from both.
Thank you to both of you.
I really enjoyed your presentation.
Pleasure.
Hi, we have a question asking, how long does it take to build a royal tomb?
Is this question for Cedric or for Ikram? For Cedric, I think.
Yeah, I guess for Cedric.
But
yeah, I'll leave it for Cedric.
It can be an open discussion. It's a really interesting question, because since we know, if I may, I will develop a little bit my answer. If we know thanks to the list that there were between 45 and 60 workmen, right, on an average. So it means then with 60, 50 people, how long it will take. During the 18th dynasty, the royal tombs are smaller. So obviously the time was shorter, but in Ramesside period, the tombs can reach, like for example, with the one of Seti I, can reach up to 100 meters. So it takes longer time, obviously. I would say the first thing the king was doing upon his coronation was to begin the work in his tomb. So then they must have taken a long time. So we can estimate between, it's going to be a very big gap in between, but between 10 to 20 years. And knowing that someone like Ramses II, who had reigned for 67 years, his tomb, he had largely the time enough to make his tomb. Same thing for Seti I. But someone like Ramses IV, just for example, when he got coronated, he was very old, and the logic was to say, well, I don't have a lot of time to survive, to live, right? Because I'm about to die almost, but I still need to have my tomb made in time. So what he did, he doubled the team. So we have in Turin the papyrus in which Ramses IV is saying, well, there was 60 people, now let's put 120 workmen, because the work has to go twice fast. So if usually it would have taken 10 years, then the time was reduced to 5 years. And if it was 20 years, then the time would have been reduced to 10. So just to mention, like they had in mind that, yes, it's quite long. And if you want to speed up the process, you need to increase the number of workmen. But in this case, since, well, the tomb of Ramses IV, we can visit it, is outstanding, really nicely decorated, etc. So we know that all that has been achieved quite in a short period of time, but with the double size the team.
Is there any other question? Also,
yes.
Doctor, also the tomb of Ramses II's sons, it's endless galleries until now.
Yes, KV5, yes.
Ignore the whole tomb until now,
Yeah.
Maybe this is why he had 67 years of reign, then he had a lot of time, and a lot of sons as well to place. Yeah. So, yes, at the same time.
We have a raised hand from one of the attendees here, Nabat Muhammad al-Baradi, so I'll allow them to speak. Yes, Nabat, please, if you would like to ask the question. So we don't have that. So maybe you can ask the question in the chat or the Q&A. There are also two questions. There is a question in Arabic about the Deir el-Medina village. Is it, sorry, I'll just translate it in English. So there is a a hole kind of near Deir el-Medina or the Deir el-Medina site. Is it possible that it's used to collect the water from the rains? Is there possibility that there is a nearby sites for collecting water from the mountains to that particular hole in the village?
So I assume that person is referring to the Great Pit at the north part, in the northern part of the site. Yes. So no, it was not made. Well, again, as far as we can understand, it was not made to collect the water from like eventual flash flood that would have occurred in the Western Mountain, and all the water would have got down. It was. We know that the first intention was to reach the water level, so the subterranean water, and unfortunately that was not reached. The water level is too deep because that well, the Great Pit, is 50 meters deep for a diameter of 35 meters wide. And then, since it was not achieved, what they did, since they had dug this gigantic hole, they used it as a dump site just to put their rubbish. But what was their rubbish? It was, as I showed, the archive of that community. So they filled it up during centuries. But regarding the flash floods, what happened, because that person points very well the fact that there was, in the antiquity, there were a lot of flash floods. And many of these flash floods have destroyed the structures inside the site of Deir el-Medina. We have traces, archaeological traces of these destruction. And what the people of Deir el-Medina did is the northwest angle of the village has been doubled. So it's like if they build a shield, they made an extra protection on that specific corner angle of the village, because all the waters, when they were going down fast from the mountain, they were hitting that particular spot in the site, and therefore the houses were destroyed all the time. So they had to make extra layers of walls in order to protect them and to avoid that to happen.
Is there any other questions? No questions? Okay, at the end, I would like to thank really Dr. Cedric Gobel. It's since a long time we didn't meet and we didn't see each other. For Ikram, it is my first time to see you. I heard about you from your research in Turin and also in UCL. And it was my pleasure to be with you and to be to listen to your research and your presentations. It returned me to Egyptology again. Nice to hear from you, and we hope to see you again, inshallah.
Likewise, Dr. Mansour. Inshallah, yes. And goodbye, and thank you again.
Goodbye.
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 Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm very glad that today technology allows us all to be together from the comfort of our home countries. Firstly, on behalf of the Sharjah Museum Authority, management and staff, I would like to thank all the attendees of this scientific seminar for their time, cooperation, and valuable knowledge in the field of Egyptology. Special thank you to the Learning Department team under the leadership of Ms. Alia Burhema for their effort in organizing this seminar and its programs, as well as selecting our guests, which are indeed grateful for their attendees. Today, in cooperation with the Museo Egizio in Turin, Italy, and as we are hosting this exhibition, Deir el-Medina, together we do not only host an ancient civilization that occupied the world for centuries and made Egypt a destination for visitors from all parts of the world, but also add a unique interactive educational exhibition for our young generation. A virtual tour was filmed in the exhibition to better take you through the experience the young generation went through in different sections. Once again, thank you all for your kind attendance and valuable participation, which indeed made this exhibition a success we are truly happy and proud of. We hope you enjoy the exhibition, the clips shared, and the benefits from the seminar. I hope that we will see you soon in Sharjah and enjoying the different rich museums around. Until we meet again, see you soon and take care.